Solve 3y squared plus 12y minus 4 equals 0 by completing the square. Let's write down the equation. So we have 3y squared plus 12y minus 4 equals 0. And I need to do two things. I need to move this constant term over to the other side, and I also need to make sure that I have a 1 in front of the y squared, so I got to divide everything by 3. It doesn't matter what order you do those two things in. I think I'll divide by the 3 first. So I get y squared plus 12 divided by 3 is 4. 4 divided by 3 is 4/3. And 0 divided by 3, that's still 0. And now I can add the 4/3 over to the other side. So I get y squared plus 4y, I'm going to leave a little space, equals 4/3. And now I need to figure out what goes in the space. So the rule is you take whatever's in front of the y, or in front of the x, or whatever the variable is, not the squared term, but just the regular y. So that would be a 4. We divide it by 2, and then we square that whole thing. So 4 divided by 2, that's 2 squared. 2 squared, that's 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So this is a 4, and I also have to add a 4 here. So this should be a perfect square now. Let's check and see if it is. So if it is a perfect square, then I should be able to put something here, and I think it looks to be plus 2. 2 plus 2, that's 4. 2 times 2, that's 4. Seems to work. And over here, I have 4/3 plus 4. Now, if you have a fraction thing where you have to add some fractions or subtract some fractions and you're still a little uncomfortable with how that works, I highly recommend that you just do a side calculation. Do it somewhere else on the paper. So I want to do 4/3 plus 4. 4/3 plus 4 is the same thing as 4/3 plus 4 over 1. I can always put a number over 1. It's the same thing. And I would like to have a common denominator. So in this case, my common denominator is going to be 3. So I want to have a 3 for both fractions. Well, this one already has a 3, so I can just leave the 4 here. This one needs a 3. I have to multiply the bottom by 3 to get 3, which means I have to multiply the top by 3. That's going to become 12. And then 12 plus 4, that's going to be 16. And that'll be 3. Okay, so this ends up being 16/3. Now I can square root both sides. So I get y plus 2 equals the square root of 16/3. And again, whenever you take the square root of the square of something with a variable in it, you have to tack on a plus or minus sign. What's the square root of 16/3? So we'll do another side calculation over here. The square root of 16/3, that's the same thing as the square root of 16 divided by the square root of 3. You're allowed to break up a square root when you have a division like this. But just to remind, you cannot do this. If I have 2 plus 4, I cannot break up a square root like that. You can't do it with a plus or a minus sign. So that's no good. But with division, 16 divided by 3, yeah, I can break up the square root. You can also do it with multiplication. So square root of 16, that's 4. And then I have a square root of 3 down here. And maybe I don't want to have a square root in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply this by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3, that's just plain old 3. And then on top, I have 4 times the square root of 3. So this ends up being 4 root 3 over 3. So now I can go back here and I have y plus 2 equals plus or minus 4 root 3 over 3. And the last thing I can do is subtract the 2 from both sides. So I get y equals negative 2 plus or minus 4 root 3 over 3. And that's my final answer.